What was the biggest Beatles blooper, would you say?
Well, the biggest mistake was the beginning, the first shot of Help. First time ever, the first time the cameras turned on Help, we were in the Bahamas and we were on a yacht out at sea, way out, because there were people on the beach shouting and screaming, so we had to go right out to sea. And there were people with sharp nets and swimmers in frogman's outfits watching out for sharks. And I'm on the ship, there's sand, sand in the generator, and Eleanor Ron comes on and cuts him loose, and on a raft, miles, well, a few hundred yards away, there's the camera with Dick Lester, and they shout, "Action!" If they're all over there. And Ringo has to dive off the yacht, yeah, into the water, and the frogmen come up, and they lift him back up, and they put him on the ship, and he's shivering because the water was cold, shivering like this, and they get the hair dry, and they dry his hair. He's sitting there, and they dry his clothes, and they say, right, we're going to, another shot, please, you're going to go again. So Ringo gets up on the thing, they said, right, action! And he goes, into the water. And they lift him up.
There was a problem though with Ringo.
Oh yeah, so he's sitting there like this.
He couldn't swim.
And this is the first shot of the film. And he said, "Hey, Victor, I have to do this again." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I can't swim." Nobody bothered to ask him. And of course, the thing is, I said, "Well, why did you go?" He said, "Well, you know, when you're in a film, when the director says action, you have to do it." And of course, when I told them they couldn't swim, they stopped too. But there was that scene in the car. We're smashing a car with George Harrison on the back. They wanted me to drive that car into a wall. I said, "I'm sorry, I don't do stunts." And Dick's a stuntman, and no good, they can't act, so I don't care. So Roy did it with all sandbags around him, and he crashed into the car. But Robert Mitchum, when he was in a movie, the director said, "Bob, I'd like you to move from that microphone to that table." And Bob Mitchum said, "Sorry, I don't do stunts."
What did you do in between takes? What did they talk about? What did you do at night? What after a hard day of filming?
You see, in those days, people thought they were long-haired kids. In England, what do you talk about to those pop people? What do they talk about? And I said, well, the other day we were sitting on the set and we were talking about the Freudian interpretation of dreams as opposed to the Jungian interpretation of dreams. And people were quite shocked. They were actually talking about things, real things that mattered, things that happened. They thought that these people were so just pop people, they have no intelligence. That's what we talked about. We talked about things that, I remember George Harrison saying, "I wonder what music Beethoven wrote for himself rather than for his patron. Why did he write secret things for him?" Things like that, just ordinary things. They were extraordinary people because they were so ordinary. In the centre of Beatlemania, there was a still small centre where the lads sat. And there was a quietness and a talking. It was wonderful. I'm so lucky to have been there. I'm here now to try and share some of that with you because I'm going to give you it as soon as I'll be dead any minute.
No. What was it like to be in their inner circle, in the eye of the hurricane called Beatlemania? What was it like?
Well, you know, it was, well, as an example, when we were doing Hard Day's Night, my sister got engaged. And I said my present to them would be, to my sister from Wales, come up to London, have a weekend in London, go to a restaurant, go to a theatre, go to a nightclub. In other words, do all the things that when you settle down and have kids, you don't do. Oh, they said, "That's great. Where are you taking her?" And I told them. And that night they all turned up. I wouldn't dream of asking them. They never asked them for anything. I think that's one of the reasons why I was they came to this restaurant. They've come to have a dance with you for your engagement, you know. Just came and did it. And then my sister was very cool, and calm, and collected. And And when they left, you went, ah! And we were still got a bit mad.
Being a star in the Beatles films, I understand that you yourself became a fan object as well. Right. You were in a New York restaurant and a policeman said, we can't control the situation.
I was chased through the streets in New York. When I went to New York to do Old Lovely War on Broadway, for which I won the Tony Award, but God knows where it is. If you come to my apartment, there's no posters. I'm not, that's not where it is. But still, at that moment, I was in New York, and I come out opening night on stage in New York, opening night on Broadway, and I'm the MC, so I come out and I say, like, good evening, and all these screams. and I didn't know this then, but around the corner, A Hard Day's Night was showing. And I was the nearest one that anyone could get hold of that was there in front of them that was in that film. And so I realized what it was, and I said, okay, my darlings, keep quiet now. I tell you what, I said to the stage manager, she said, all right. I said, look, at the end of the show, come down in the front row, and we'll do a 10-minute semester on the Beatles. And so they said, thank you, thank you. I knew what it was like to hang out to people you love, really love, which they were. That's the emotion. Who was that writer that said, I don't understand all this emotion of the Beatles? I said, no, that's why your book was so fucking dreadful, but still. Can't remember his name now. I won't mention his name, you might see me, but still. And so they came down and sat in the front row, and they were shaking and trembling. Tell me about George, tell me about John, about Paul, about Ringo. And I understand that. God, when I was a kid, if somebody said they knew Flash Gordon or Rita Hayworth, I don't know whoever was there. And so I told them the story, the same story I told everybody about when they visited me when I had the flu, you know that one? I had flu, and they came to visit me each in their turn, because at that time they looked exactly the same. First person that came in was George Harrison, who said, I've come to plump your pillows. Whenever anyone's ill in bed, they have their pillows plumped. And he left. John came in, Sieg Heil, Simon. The doctor's ready to experiment on you, Sieg Heil, and he left. Ringo walked in, picked up the menu, was sitting by the bed, looked at the menu, looked at me and said, once upon a time there were 3 bears, Mummy Bear, Daddy Bear, Baby Bear, and he left. Paul McCartney opened the door and said, is it catching? I said, yes. And he closed the door and never saw him again. And so that was the difference. And so these kids then went to school the next day. They had some crumb of, remember I'm talking now then, when people, they would call them mop tops. Nobody knew which one was which. And so they went to school the next day with a crumb of comfort. George, and they'd be outside the stage door at night, and they'd be shouting. I'd come up, they'd say, Mr. Spinetti! I'd say, yes. What did George Harrison say? And I'd say, plump the pillows, oh my God! And then they'd say, what does it mean? And Warren Beatty came to the show one night, and he's sitting there, and he said, I'm a bit worried because there's a crowd of screaming teenagers at the stage door. If I go up there, they'll tear me apart. I didn't like to say they were Beatles fans. I said, that's okay, it's okay. So we opened the door and all these girls parted, leaving room for Warren Beatty to walk through shouting, Victor! I can see Warren Beatty's face even now, but it was amazing. And I was chased through the streets, going to a restaurant, and this guy that was, you want me to tell him? Yeah. No, and it was, you were discussing earlier, because he's a dummy, he's had a lot of work, he's lots of questions. We get through them all. That's fine. Saying, if you want to ask
go on.
Okay. There was